Welcome to Corpstruction, a show about the missions, activities, and employees of the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm your host, Brandon Parrish. Today, I'm joined by Chris Strunk. Chris is the Chief of Military Interagency and International Services and Design here at the Tulsa District. He's a licensed professional engineer and a licensed structural engineer. He holds a Bachelor of Architectural Engineering from Oklahoma State University with a focus in structural engineering and a secondary focus in mechanical engineering. Welcome to Corpstruction, Chris.
Thank you, Brandon.
Can you tell me what you do as the chief of the Interagency International Services, how that might be a little different from the other missions?
So yeah, that one is probably a little different from some of our more straightforward missions. Military design is easy to understand. The IIS portion, that Interagency International Services, what we do there is that's where we're supporting other agencies, FEMA, NIST, let's see, we've the VA, any of the non-DoD type agencies that reach out to the Corps and need support. I'm the design section that would support them within Tulsa District.
So you're working the VA project too? You're overseeing those guys who are working that. Well, no, those are Dam Safety Production Center, right?
The Dam Safety Production Center is doing that work for my section. We're over those projects, so it's kind of like when we outsource work to an AE or to a contracted work. Instead of going outside the Corps, we went to the DSPC to assist us on two of the projects at the BA in Muskogee, the Lower Hillside, and more recently being that one, and then the Upper Hillside stabilization that they did a few years back.
Okay, so you came to the Corps, you came to the Tulsa District in 2009, that's right?
Yeah, that's correct. I joined July of 2009, so it's just been over, what's that?
11 years.
11 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me, with that, was that right out of college? Well, you did some work right out of college for some.
My professional career started in about '98. I was attending Oklahoma State. I started interning over holiday breaks and over the summer at Wallace Engineering here in Tulsa, and then I worked there through about 2005, and then I joined Phillips Slaughter Rose, a local design build firm, before joining the Corps in 2009. So I've worked for two private sector firms, one large structural engineering company and one design build company before coming to the Corps.
And so one of the reasons that we had you on today was because we were going to talk about your deployment to Florida. But before we get into that, how many other deployments have you been on since you've been here as a civilian?
As a civilian with the Corps, a few. I'm part of the structural specialist cadre. It's an urban search and rescue group that the Corps is responsible for maintaining and training under ESF 9 with FEMA. It's under that type of deployment as a PRT or a response team. I've deployed most recently to Ridgecrest earthquake out in California, Hurricane Henry in Texas. And then most recently, the Champlain Tower collapse in Surfside, Florida.
What kind of work do you guys do as far as like when they request a structural engineer to go out there for and you said ESF 9, that's the emergency system framework, emergency response system framework, something
Yes.
like that, right?
Most of the Corps is probably more familiar with the EOC type work that we do in-house with the ESF 3 missions. ESF 9 is the urban search and rescue, and that's a FEMA-led response team, but the Corps has the responsibility of training, like I said, the structural engineers that are part of those teams. Those are large teams. There's several large federal teams. And then states also have teams. Oklahoma, by the way, has two state teams, Oklahoma 1 and Oklahoma 2. Each of those has 6 structural engineers that have been trained. And we train all of them, whether they're Corps employees or whether they're private engineers that are one of the state teams or one of the federal teams. We do that out of Moffett Field out in California at Ames Research Facility. It's an older NASA installation. But what we do as part of that team is we help, what we like to say is we help make it safer for the rescuers. We're there to provide our expertise in buildings and unfortunately, most often building collapse to help identify access paths or routes that the rescuers can get in and hopefully rescue victims. And after rescue, as it moved into recovery, we kind of maintain that same mission where we're there to provide guidance on how to basically take apart a damaged structure.
What are you looking for when you're trying to identify a safe path, or what type of indicators are out there that would tell you, hey, this is safe or this isn't safe?
We do a lot of training. We do a lot of case studies on previous events. Some of those have date back to like the Murrow building. The Corps was very active in the Murrow building, providing engineers to support that, as well as 9/11. And what we're looking for, we have a couple different missions. If we're on scene first, one of the things we do is like a rapid assessment of the site and determine if there's any hazards that, as a building professional, we may be more inclined to notice. Those could be like overhead hanging things that may fall and hurt someone that as they're trying to approach and breach into a damaged building. Or it could be something about based on our knowledge of how the framework, as a structural engineer, how the framework of a building works, that we can provide some guidance on where are better paths of access and egress, where most likely the stairwells were, the hallways are. Most buildings have a typical kind of template, and if we don't have the drawings, you kind of have to use your professional knowledge of how things are laid out, and we then provide that to the rescuers and say, well, like the Champlain Tower, this is an apartment complex, so typical apartments are laid out. You've got an entryway, maybe a kitchenette or a dining area, and then an apartment, depending on how many rooms obviously are in the apartments. And so once you kind of figure out what that layout is, you can start doing your excavation and access work by the rescuers to try and get in and, like I said, and get those victims that may be trapped. What we're specifically looking for, like areas of refuge, where if there's a place that it's more likely that someone would have gone to. And a lot of our case history is based off of the earthquakes that we've experienced in the U.S. and foreign countries as well. That we see a type of buildings and how they behave, whether they're steel or concrete, masonry or wood. Each of those has their own kind of typical design and detailing, and that's what we bring to the team as our experience there. What we also do a lot of, in what Champlain and Florida was it's called monitoring, which sounds like we just sit there and watch, and it's a little more in depth than that. What we're doing is we're looking for active hazards, like if anyone saw pictures of that building, a large portion of it collapsed over the middle of the night, but there was still a piece standing, and that one was really troublesome in that no one knew why it collapsed. I mean, the building had been around for 40 plus years. And so if you're looking at a building that's like, I'll compare it to the Murrow building where you had a partial collapse in a standing structure. Well, we knew why that building collapsed. It was attacked, and once that explosive had gone off, you could figure out why did it fail where it did. With Champlain, they're still researching now on why it collapsed and why it failed. So there's a lot of unknowns about it. If we're in an earthquake type response, an earthquake struck, the movement of the building itself could have caused the collapse. So you kind of know what you're going into. With Champlain, we didn't. So you still had a large high-rise standing partially, and so there's a lot of debris hanging out of that building. It was concrete, and so one of our first tasks when we got on site was to get out our total stations, which is a piece of surveying equipment, and use it to monitor the portions of the building that were still standing to make sure that it wasn't moving, or that there wasn't like a large piece that was going to maybe slide off and injure someone down below as they were trying to begin those early recovery efforts.
Yeah. Have you looked at any of the photos that we have here of the Murrah building that some of the engineers took when they were out there?
Yes, I have. I actually have some of the survey manuals from when the engineers were on site at the Murrah building, doing basically some of the similar things that I was doing at Champlain with several other Corps engineers, as well as some FEMA engineers that were tasked to support us.
The reason I asked is because we have a few here in our office that were part of a lot of the stuff that we gathered when we moved from the other building.
Yep.
And obviously it's a completely different scenario, but when you look at the facade, how the building is gone and it looks cut in half, and it reminds me of those photos, what you saw at Champlain, the images, and obviously it's a different, the whole thing was a different reason and everything, but it was just weird how that part that was standing, it just reminded me of some of those photos.
Yeah, growing up in Oklahoma, I'm very familiar with the Murrah building. It's definitely one of those things that, that happened in '95. As the year I graduated high school. And so it was one of those things I was thinking about when I went into engineering. I'd already enlisted in the Army National Guard for Oklahoma. And at the time I was an EMT and a first responder. And so it was definitely something that I think was a time in my life that affected the future. And now looking back on it, you're right. There are some real similarities. And talking with the other engineers, because we had some who responded to Champlain, who had been both at Murrah as a structure specialist, working as an engineer.
They would have been pretty new at that time, I would imagine.
It was.
Yeah.
The new FEMA system, I believe, had been revamped in like '94. And the Murrah building was like one of the first instances of a large-scale response with the current framework, with the FEMA teams that we now are more familiar with. And one of those engineers is from New York. He's a good friend of mine. He's another instructor with as part of our cadre who teach the training. And he had responded to both the Murrah building, 9/11, and then Champlain. And that's one of those things that we talked about, in some of our infrequent downtime was, and what are those similarities and what are the things that we can learn from it, so we can use this as a case study and better prepare for the next event, unfortunately, whenever it should happen.
So you guys have a proverbial sort of overwatch role too in structural. You're watching the building, looking for weak spots where potential items might fall, like you were saying, or I don't know, where rubble or something might move. When I know you got like the call pretty quick that you were probably going to have to go, or that you were going to be asked to go, like, was it the next day or the day after? I think it was like the 24th, and then you said you got the call like the 25th or something.
I got the call from our headquarters program manager on the 25th that initially it looked like there was going to be enough FEMA resources that we likely wouldn't be called in to augment them. Like I said, they have 3 to 6 engineers generally on their team, and it looked like at first that they had enough, so we were monitoring it, and the program manager actually deployed via headquarters to basically start that fact finding for future case studies. So he was on site and working with the IST, the incident support team that FEMA sends in to help augment the local incident command. He was working with the senior structural engineer that's part of the IST. They have one structural engineer generally that is assigned to them. And we're very familiar with Scott, the gentleman who was part of the team in the response, and they noticed real quick that just based on the layout of that building that they were going to need a lot more eyes on it, more like what they had at the Murrow building and what they ended up using at 9/11 to look at some of the adjacent structures. So the call was put out, and a mission assignment ended up coming about a week later. We got it on, I want to say, the second or the third. No, we were down there by the third, like the first. We got it.
Yeah, I think you told me you received confirmation of the verbal mission assignment or whatever.
Yeah.
On the 1st of July.
Right. So it had been about a little under a week from when the building initially collapsed, and our typical deployment, our agreement, our SOU, our
statement of understanding or whatever. Yeah.
Apologize for the
You'll forgive me.
acronyms.
I'm gonna. Yeah. I just want people to make sure they know. Like you were talking about IST before, and what is that?
Incident support team.
Incident support team.
And
Okay.
I try and do that myself.
No, it's okay. It happens.
But what we have a 2-year agreement through headquarters for the engineers that are on the team. There are about 35 of us. We're on monthly rotations, a red, white, and blue that matches FEMA's monthly red, white, blue system. And there's roughly 10 to 12 on each team that we try and maintain. We have a whole bunch of extra training we have to do. And so when we got the call out, we ended up sending eight structural engineers from the Corps, and then another 12, I believe, came from FEMA to augment us. So we had a crew of 20 that were doing the monitoring in it. It initially started out as, like I said, looking at specific items for the teams that were, there's a rescue team that's comprised of FEMA personnel, largely firefighters. There's search and rescue dog handlers who are doing searching as well. And they're actively were working the pile, and we were helping them by being able to be their eyes in the sky. The Champlain complex, the way it was set up, that building had two large condominiums, one on the north and one on the south, and we'd gotten access to the 6th and 3rd floors of those buildings, and so we'd set up on the balconies and were able to look down and provide that oversight, overwatch. As we moved through the 4th, and the decision was made to implode the remaining part of the building, we also were tasked with trying to map and get a 3-dimensional image of what the debris pile was before the implosion. The concern was if we would add a whole bunch of more rubble on top,
Right.
And obviously we're still in rescue mode at this time, and the concern was if we have to go through really slowly as we delayer that debris pile, that we'd have to go through like a whole other half a building or possibly. And so they wanted to know what did that 3-dimensionally look like, and with our surveying equipment, we were able to do a 3D mapping. There's also some other Corps folks that were there out of the ERDIC system. Some of the lab guys came out and were doing LiDAR and doing imagery. But fortunately, the contractor who brought the building down was able to do it straight down so that it didn't add additional debris onto the area where we knew that there were our victims located. Once the building was brought down, we got more hands-on, and we were working the physical recovery effort with the teams. We sent out 2 engineers at a time on the pile, and they were helping identify components of the building, because if you picture a large concrete building and it falls from either a great height or like the part of the building that was imploded, it's hard to identify if you're not super familiar with what's the difference in a column and a beam and a slab. And with the forensics of it, Miami-Dade, a homicide, and had contacted and was working with NIST, another agency under the Department of Commerce, to do forensics on the building. and they didn't have the engineers who were trained to work in that environment. And so I ended up augmenting them and providing them basically our capabilities on the pile to help pull out evidentiary pieces so they can do their studies after the fact. And in the end, I think we were able to pull out over 600 pieces of the building.
Oh, wow.
And salvage those before they got destroyed in the removal of the debris and it was kind of a dual mission. That one's something unique. We hadn't done that before. So as part of that, we were obviously working in, it's hard to describe what that environment looked like. A whole lot of concrete, a whole lot of dust, a lot of rebar. Obviously, it's apartments. You have everyone's contents that are in there, and it's as we moved through the rescue and eventually the local incident commander, with I guess an agreement with the mayor and the local townsfolk, had decided we were moving into the recovery efforts. It's important as you're delayering and moving through that you get out people's keepsakes, and there are a lot of things that whether it's a building that collapsed or the building that was imploded that mean a lot to people, photos, wedding albums, that kind of thing. So they do a really good job of trying to collect those things, and it helps them identify where in the building they are. We were working with the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. Israel has developed some amazing capabilities, and it's kind of like reverse social engineering. They did the studies to figure out who was in what apartments where, and they had a team back in Israel. We heard it was somewhere north of 20, maybe 30 people that were studying the imagery and studying the photos and stuff that we're pulling out and figuring out where we were in the building, who was likely to be in those apartments. And so if we found an apartment and we knew there may be, let's say, like an elderly couple, if there would be 2 or 3 or 4 people in there. So once we found one person, we're able to kind of think we knew where we were. We would know that we needed to keep looking in that area because there could be, like I said, up to 2, 3, 4 additional people. It's very important to try and give closure to those families who lost folks, and that part's definitely something that it's hard to train for, but it's why we're there. We're there to rescue. We're there to help in the recovery efforts and to bring closure to all those that were impacted.
What was there anything in particular that you all found that is just something that really stuck out to you? That
I think when you first show up, the way we're modeled, like I said, we have like a 2-year agreement. We have a 6-hour deployment window. We initially think that we're going into it with like about a 7-day mission, and you're pretty much going to work the first 24 hours straight once you hit the ground.
Yeah.
I landed at 3:50 or something, and I went straight from the airport to the site, changed into my uniform outside, right. Walked in, got badged, reported to the building, and took over a monitoring station, and then worked through. I ended up managing and overseeing the day shift, which was noon to midnight roughly. And so that first couple of days, you're just like in this go.
Right. You don't even probably have time to think about like anything outside or external.
You don't. I don't think I called my wife or talked to any family back home for probably the first 4 or 5 days, just because you're literally living that. I mean, we were working some ridiculous hours, 16, 18 hours. I know one guy did something over 30, like before we could get everyone engaged and relief in. And then once you get past that, once things kind of get into a rhythm, that's when you start. Like when I was working the pile, and it's we're in full PPE,
right?
So that's our
personal
protective equipment. Yeah. Oh, it's hot.
Miami, Florida area, right?
And there's a tropical storm moving through, so it's 90 plus humidity, 90 degrees. You're wearing fire rescue boots. You're wearing gloves, and we had to wear respirators due to the contaminants in the air. And so that, like I said, that first couple of days, you're just so into it that you're not really aware of some of this stuff. But after about 5 or 6 days, you start noticing smaller things. And I have little kids. I've got a 9 and a 6-year-old boys, and it was the Legos. Seeing like Legos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's when I start. Then you like. It's kind of like you start seeing the leaves in the forest, and you're no longer looking at the forest, and you really start looking, and you start seeing people's wedding books, and you start seeing photos, you start seeing, most people take pictures of things that are joyous in their life, know, whether it's birthday parties or like I said, anniversaries. A lot of the folks in this building were elderly, and it's seeing those things that you start thinking about, back home, and you start thinking about your own life. Like, what if this was your family, and what if this was, and it gets to you. It gets really emotional.
How do you mentally prepare for that day in and day out once you hit that point, how do you even decompress from something like that?
I'm going to get this acronym wrong. You're probably going to have to look it up. It's CISM. It's critical incident stress management.
Okay. So is there somebody there?
So there are people there definitely with the FEMA teams. They bring in medical professionals. They got they got a lot of support to help the rescuers. The Corps itself, in headquarters, the lead for the CISM, that critical incident stress management group, is Command Surgeon Captain Janisco, and he came down towards the end of our deployment and sat down and went through with those and talked through some of what are those healthy stress relieving things, and how do you move back into it. And it's like doing these interviews, doing this. It's hard to describe the things that you go through unless you've been there. And he. So what he reminds us is, you've got these 19 other folks that you went through this with. All in all, I think there's over 50-something structural engineers total who participated in this, and whether they're on the state teams or the federal teams that responded, because we've trained with those guys and we trained them. We know a lot of them, and so we know that we can reach out to them. And the Corps guys that were on my shift. One's from Baltimore, one's from Salt Lake City, and we've talked a couple times since we've been back. How are things going? How's work? Obviously, always left in the middle of projects and construction, and fortunately, with the Corps, we've got a great team backing us, and so we had folks here back in Tulsa that were filling in for me. They had folks that were filling in for them, but it probably takes a week or so before you kind of get back into the groove.
Yeah, and you were there for what, like 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks.
Yeah, I stayed. All right, so I deployed. Like I said, I ended up overseeing the daytime operations, that noon to midnight shift, because our program manager had deployed early, and he had been there about 4 or 5 days before the rest of us. He was working, like, I want to say, like 18-hour days every day, because he was trying to cover both shifts to manage. So he was doing like a swing shift between the two operating shifts. Once we transitioned from recovery into evidentiary support with NIST, as we closed out the project, I stayed an extra week, and I took over as the senior Corps guy, overseeing that mission. And I stayed for another 4 or 5 days until we brought in a relief team, which another engineer from Tulsa, Captain Grusing, ended up coming in on the relief team and helped close out and provided that. So I don't know if you're going to get to do another one of these, but Matt's perspective on that coming in and doing the relief might be interesting as well.
I'll definitely reach out to him when he gets back. Now you were in the Guard too. Are you still in the National Guard?
No, I got out in 2004.
Okay. So had you deployed with them as well?
Similar type events. As a combat medic for most of my 9 years, I have background in guess my MOS, if we want to go that deep,
Yeah.
it was 76 Juliet, which is medical supply logistics at first, and then I quickly transitioned over to a 91 Bravo,
So you were a doc.
which is a combat medic, and
Yeah.
then which I guess now is a 68 Whiskey.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think that's kind of why I have the skill set for some of this is my specialty. I was for most of my time I was with Charlie Company 700 Support, 45th Infantry here out of Oklahoma, and as a hospital unit, a lot of the time I was functioning as like a triage sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So working outside the battalion or the support hospital as that like sorting, like that's kind of what we're doing here. We're triaging a building versus triaging
People.
So I think some of those skill sets I still take advantage of.
And you have that same situation where you have like people who you were with when you were downrange or whatever, and
Yep.
you talk to them every once in a while and reach out, and you kind of lean on each other.
And still do with a lot of those folks, whether it was medical missions that we did in Central America, or whether it was with some of the tornadoes that went through. Like,
Were you in
99.
Honduras? Were you
Yeah.
in Honduras?
Yep.
Joint Task Force Bravo?
Yep.
All right, me too.
I actually, strange story there. That was when I decided to get engaged to my wife, and I ended up going to Tegucigalpa, and I met an expat who made an engagement ring for me, and I brought it back and asked my wife to marry me. That was while still in school.
Did you fly into Tegus? Or out of Tegus?
I think we flew out of it.
Yeah.
It was
It's a very, very interesting landing.
It is. Y'all need to ask Brandon about that sometime.
Yeah. That landing is interesting. You like fly right over. Well, and I think it used to be even closer, but it feels like you're going to land on the mountain on the way, on the way into the runway.
I think it's kind of like flying into is it Anchorage when you fly in that you're like facing the mountains. You're like, I hope it stops.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that was a great trip. I was there in 2012. I think it was 2000. Yeah, 2012. I was there. So from like I want to say like the summer, right up until towards close to the end of the year. It was. I think I came back before Christmas. Yeah, I came back just before Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there in '99.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
So
yeah, it's changed.
I hope so, for the better.
So when you saw, did you hear about the event from getting the phone call that you might deploy, or did you see it on the news? I know that's kind of a weird. Did you see it on the news? And
I want to say the way I can't remember honestly if I saw it first or if I talked to Jeff, our program manager and lead structure specialist out of headquarters first.
Okay.
It's one of those things that we're constantly
right.
So I mentioned the three teams. The red team is on call in July. I'm the alternate team lead for the red team. So you get like a warning notice from EngLink saying, hey, your team's about to come up. Make sure you're either good to go or, if you need to sign out for some reason, if you're not going to be available. So we tend to pay attention to these kind of things because this is like the things that unfortunately that we have to respond to. And so it's definitely one of those things. I can't remember honestly now. I'd have to look up and see if Jeff called me first or if I called him to see, or, are you watching this? Does this look like something that we're going to have to respond to? And so it's definitely something that, because I've been doing this for years, even my wife, and friends that engineers in the community, since I came out of the Tulsa professional community before joining the Corps, they'll send me like text or something like, hey, did you see this building collapsed in Indiana or something strange? And I'll be like, no, and I'll start looking it up and start, seeing kind of what the extent is, who's there. Because it is such a small community. One of our instructors, I think he did as all engineers do, he likes to do math, and he figured out that most structural engineers are background is in civil engineering, and he's figured out that half of 1% of structural engineers are structure specialists, and so we are we're a very small uh, segment of the profession, and we probably know like all 200 or 300 of us in the country.
Oh, there's only about 200 or 300 of you in the country.
Yeah,
Wow.
total. That's if you took every state team,
Yeah.
every, and we're all preparing for, if the next big earthquake in California, uh, the New Madrid, the Cascadia event, maybe in the Northwest, up in the Seattle area, um, up into Alaska, which it's definitely something that you're going to need that many engineers. If it took 50 of us to do a building for 3 weeks,
that's a good portion of you. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it going to take when we're talking a large earthquake that maybe hits a housing community or some of the ones that have previously been in like California, where you have multiple buildings that need to be investigated.
So when you get like either a text message or you see something on the news, and is that what's on your mind a lot of times? Is like, I wonder if if you see it on the news, have you seen something on the news happen, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, there's your warning order in your text message, or letting you know that you're about to get something coming down in your text message, and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Fortunately, the type of events like Champlain, those are out of the blue. That collapsed in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
It's not like a hurricane or something where we see it and we're watching. Oh, is this going to be, is it going to be a 4 or a 5 or a 3? Is it going to hit
where
Miami or Charleston or New Orleans again or Houston? So those you have time to prepare for.
Right.
And FEMA does. They'll pre-deploy a team just like we do with the power team. We'll send out folks and they'll be waiting. Versus something that's more like a Murrow building or 9/11, where it's out of the blue, and then it's the logistics. So like for us, it was, we started tracking the calls, and once we got that mission assignment, that tasker to individually go, it's a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Going to Miami, which is a popular tourist spot right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
And so
you had a delay because of probably the logistics.
Yeah, we had a couple of us had delays in getting there by almost a day with just trying to get flights.
Yeah.
And then with the reduced flights now, and if they have any inclement weather in between where you're trying to go versus where you're leaving, it can cause further delays. And then just the silly ones like trying to find a hotel in Miami
to stay overnight
while
you're waiting.
Got the government per diem rate.
Right.
over the 4th of July weekend was not easy.
I bet,
we were very fortunate in that Carnival, I believe it was Carnival, volunteered a cruise ship, and they had a cruise ship that was being renovated, that was docked, and so they brought a crew from like one next door to man it, and provided us 3 hot meals a day and a place to stay.
Oh wow!
It was being
so you stayed on the cruise ship.
The cruise ship was docked.
But I mean, you boarded it every night or before you went to bed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which like I said,
obviously you didn't get much time to like look around. You were just going to your room.
Well, because it wasn't open, it wasn't staffed fully.
Right.
So it was pretty much just like having a small floating dorm room.
Yeah. Did you sleep better when you did?
It was nice having a place, a dedicated place to sleep. The fact that they were doing laundry for us, because you get amazingly dirty. I
bet. Yeah.
And I don't know how many people were on the boat at one time, but there was definitely several hundred. There were bus loads that would
rescue team people, different
dogs.
Yeah.
It was great.
Wow.
So you had, which it brings some logistics into it for them, but
that town is it's a little under 6,000 people from what I think that was the
Surfside.
Yeah. It's a little under suburb of Miami,
Yeah.
Did you get the sense that the community has come together pretty well? Or?
Oh, absolutely. One of the amazing things So normally, the things that we deal with when we deploy is because we're a small element of the Corps. We're one of the smallest response teams out there.
Right.
We normally deploy in twos, fours, sixes. Uh, Outside of Haiti, where we sent large teams to help after that earthquake, and like I said, Oklahoma City and 9/11, there haven't been a whole lot of large deployments of our cadre. So we don't deploy with large support staff.
Right.
So we generally are either sleeping in vehicles or sleeping in what apartments we can find, or hotel rooms we're often sharing because we're on like night and day shifts,
Right.
and just making the best out of what you can. So when you show up and they had housing ready for us, the ship was ready. We just showed up. They'd already given them our name, and we walked in. I didn't get there till 2:30 in the morning. The first time I actually got to go and stay, and it took maybe 10 minutes to like board and get on and get to a signed room and crash.
Wow.
And then the other one was
That's a big deal. Like that
I-
really, that's really a big deal when you can get into a place and you don't have to spend a whole lot of time unpacking or trying to like, wait there. You can kind of like just go to your room, maybe take a shower and
Yep.
just fall on your bed and sleep.
Yep.
That is that is such a big deal
that
because like
comfort is
the mental aspect of it too. It lets you like actually kind of rest,
that, and an NGO, a non-government
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
World Kitchen Cuisine. I think that's the name of it. Was doing meals, and they do them all. I think this was one of the first times they've deployed for kind of this type mission in the U.S. They do them in other countries, but they partner with local food trucks and restaurants, and so they were putting out something ridiculous, like 3,000 hot meals a day.
Oh, that's amazing.
Through part of it, and so our basic necessities were taken care of,
Yeah.
and that takes a lot of the logistics out of not having on-site active support. We did have Jacksonville District was their EOC was how we Emergency Operation Command was how
Yeah.
we were contracted and were facilitating our mission. So we did have a local district that was supporting us, but they weren't on site with.
So you were kind of reaching back to them. Well, how long were you there before you finally got to call your wife and kids and talk to them?
I want to say I probably didn't call back until the fourth or fifth day.
Okay.
It was I know when it was. It was the 4th of July.
Okay.
Because that was the day that they imploded the building that
Okay.
night at like 10:40. Because everyone had to clear the site so they could do that. So we had to wait for the building to come down, and then for them to go in and make sure that there weren't any unexploded ordnances or anything before we could go back to work. So we had a few hours downtime, and that was the first time I'd talked to her.
That's a whole nother animal too, isn't it? That whole like that where the guys that do the demolition of the building,
yeah.
because you have to know what all the stress points and specific. There's a specific. It's a science and an art too.
That is definitely a small group of contractors and professionals that do that work. I believe that the firm that did Champlain also did the Murrow building.
Oh, okay. Wow. And when they're recruiting for deployment teams, the different deployment teams for the Corps, and obviously a lot of times we're falling under FEMA. I know here the main one for the rest of us who aren't typically engineers, a lot of it is power team. That's what a lot of us do. And one of the sort of I don't want to say recruiting, but one of the things that they tell you when you join up with something like that is it's a good opportunity to do something different for a little while. And you're doing something different, but it really still is very much connected directly to your primary job here at the Corps in terms of engineering. So, what for you? Why do you why are you part of that team, and why have you maintained it?
I think the answer I'd give to that is kind of like, I said I have little kids. I got a 9 and 6 year old, and they're like, "Well, why do you got to go?" And I said, "Because I can. Uh, there's people who need help. I've got the training to do it. I've got the expertise and the experience to do it, and I feel the same way about it's something to give back. It's something that needs to be done. Uh, it's there are a lot of really good engineers, uh, not only in this office and this building, but just in the community at large. There's not a lot that can work in those kind of environments because of my background in the military, my background as a first responder. Um, that type of ability to work in a high pressure situation where if you're going to make a recommendation that someone either take down this wall or go through this opening or you're going to take apart this pile and you're not going to endanger or you're not going to make it more dangerous for those rescuers right around you. That's hard. It's a hard call. There's some that get the training, and then when they actually have to execute, it's a lot of pressure. If you're going to, okay, I'm going to pick up 10-15 tons of debris and it's not going to make it worse, or I'm going to tell someone that you need to go through this window instead of that door, or you need to avoid this, or the worst case would be if we're watching it and we think something's moving and we're going to clear the site. We're going to tell everyone to get back because something could happen. Um, that's a lot of pressure. Um, I just think it's a strange circumstance that my background before I became an engineer um, kind of led me to this position where I can use my professional experience and expertise with my military training, and be able to do this kind of operation and serve on these teams with a lot of these great folks. It's an amazing thing. I'm really glad I do it. I'm glad to be half of that or a part of that 0.5%. Um, but I'd say the same thing I told my kids. I do it because I can and I should.
You feel a sort of a moral obligation, so to speak, that you because you have the training, you have the ability to do it. Have you ever seen anybody in those situations, and you don't have to be specific, obviously, but have you seen people react to it and maybe come to that realization, like you said, that maybe this isn't the thing for them to be trying to do? Or
It happens. It's not often. A
uh-huh.
lot of times they're still able to work it, but then when they get back home, they drop off, and that's what they should do. I mean, if you can't um, do that on a daily or routine basis for one of these events, you definitely don't want to put yourself or anyone else at danger. Um, so there have been a few that have come back from a deployment like this and said, I'm done.
Yeah, and I use the term moral obligation, but for you, you feel like you have the ability to do it, and it's something you can deal with and handle.
Yeah, I, that's probably a good way of putting it.
Yeah. What what are what I think how I'm going to put this. So you said it's about a 0.5% of the community that has these specific skills and or training and skills and that are
Right.
for what you guys do, which comes down to a few hundred people in the United States altogether.
Yeah, there's probably that have totally come through the system that may have either retired or left a team, moved. For There's probably a total of maybe 400 or 500 that have been through the training. There's probably another like I said, 300 active. And for the Corps, we maintain a cadre of roughly 35. It takes quite a bit of additional training to do this. You got to meet all the FEMA requirements, and then we have a week-long training, Structure Specialist 1 that we do each October. We do a level 2 course, Structure Specialist 2. We're really creative with names there. in May, that's the one that I mainly assist with, and then we do quarterly regional trainings for annual. So everyone has to go through the first week-long training to maintain your readiness and your certifications. You have to maintain annual refresher kind of training. That's what that regional training is. And with the current COVID environment, distance working, teleworking, we're trying to do those virtually. But like I said, part of that is, until people actually deploy, they don't know if they're going to be able to physically handle it. Well, some of that actually is physical. Trying to walk across a concrete rubble pile with this one had crushed cars in it and had large debris and rebar, and there's a lot of commotion going on as you got excavators working right next to you, saws and jackhammers and all kinds of equipment. So it's loud. Your feet are very unstable. There's some folks that don't have the physical dexterity to maneuver safely, and so part of the training is we work them through that, and we see how they physically can negotiate. We have rubble piles that we've set up that we use for training. A lot of it, although the Champlain deployment didn't have any, oftentimes we have to go into the structures, and there's a confined space element there, and it's a little different than saying, oh, okay, I can operate maybe like for those that are in the Corps, like in a conduit or something it's classified as a confined space, but it's
pretty big though.
You still got some airspace around you versus crawling through a hole in a collapsed building.
Not much bigger than an HVAC.
The smallest one I know I've crawled through that was simulated was I crawled through a standard filing cabinet drawer.
Oh wow!
And
you fit through
with a lot of effort.
Wow.
And so we do a lot of confined space training. We do firefighter training, not to put out fires, but low rescue and high angle rope training, so that if we need to, we can rig up and we can drop in via rope. We can be rescued by rope. Some things we do when we respond to these kind of events that are different than this one, and we do mapping from inside the building. So you're trying to crawl around and use like a laser pointer or even something as simple as like a tape measure to try and figure out where all have the rescuers been. It's kind of like trying to map an ant tunnel from within inside the tunnel without knowing what the tunnels look like.
Oh wow.
So we do things like that. We do a lot with we do some work with wide area search, where we're training this exercise. We use Survey 123 for all you GIS folks out there that are familiar with Survey 123. We were using it to locate things within the collapsed portion of the building. And we were using drones for the first time, where we would identify something, mark it Survey 123, get the GPS coordinates, get a photo, and then we would fly a drone over and have a drone come down and hover and take a picture of it in relation to the rest of the building.
How helpful is that when you can have something like a drone? Did you find it extremely useful?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
Because we weren't actually operating them. They were done by Florida International University.
Okay.
Was doing one of the firefighting response teams that was there actually was doing some drone flights as well. We'll see how much it changes. I know it delayed us sometimes because it took time to coordinate
flight plans.
Yeah, they're full FAA.
Yeah.
And they're they're coordinating amongst themselves, and it's still, I believe, registered as a no-fly zone over
Yeah.
that structure. And so trying to work out, who was there, if there was if there were multiple drones flying, trying to get one cleared out so the one you're working with could come in. Um, I think it's something that we'll see as we move forward with modernization and new technologies. I think drones, they've been used in several. We use. Let me back up. In addition to drones, we use borescopes and we use other uh, uh, technology to do like infrared scanning and to do uh, uh, camera access. If anyone's, I don't know if any of the photos have become published yet, but you're likely to see some folks with some pieces of equipment where they're running like a fiber optic camera down into the debris to see if they can locate somebody or a void or an area of refuge that someone might have taken cover in. So we're adapting that technology, but it's something that you really don't know until probably a year or two later, as it.
Once you get the after action reports back on the use of the technology, you do a lot of work with STEM as well, right? Like, I mean, I know we were at an event once and you were out there judging for one of the contests, weren't you?
Yep, I do.
With SAME, right? With SAME.
Yep, for SAME. I think for that event, that's the Tulsa Engineering Foundation's Technology Challenge. That's the largest kind of active science fair or engineering and science competition that's held in the Tulsa area. Roughly 1,200 kids, I think, participated in it. Last year we had to do it virtually. So, I think when you went, I was doing the event where kids make a ping pong launcher out of a mousetrap.
Right.
Spring. I rewrote the rules this year so that since it was virtual and I wasn't sure everyone could get ping pong balls at home, that they were able to launch marshmallows. And so they would I had them build the same kind of launcher and then take pictures of it and then try and see how many marshmallows they could fit in I think it was a 2 liter. I told them to take like a 2 liter and cut a 2 liter in half and make that your target.
Oh wow!
And then from 10 feet away, see how many you can make in 2 minutes, and then kind of take some pictures of how they had it set up, and then provide a little bit of a
video or something,
some photos and some analysis on just a paragraph on what they could have done better. But that's something I've been doing with that specific for, gosh, I know it's been over 15 years.
Oh wow!
Before that, I've also been for the Tulsa District back when they did the Tulsa Science Fair. I represented Tulsa District in the Army. They'd asked us at one point to do the Army Awards for the Science Fair. So, it's something. STEM is definitely something that I find important. I think it's not only I've been doing it long before I had kids. It's something I think that as we as an engineering and scientific community, we need more of us. And if there's anything we can do to get kids engaged and know that it's more than just doing calculations or math, that the application of math, which the simplest terms would probably be physics, is what makes things fun. It's great to see the amazing things that a child can create, whether it's a Lego, like I mentioned with my kids, and seeing the strange contraptions they make, or if it's something as simple as making a mousetrap throw ping pong balls.
There's a certain amount of creativity too for people who have that ability to really apply what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, there really is. I don't know when you're going to air this, but this is during the Olympics, and if you just watch, like I think 2-3 nights ago they started the field events. Every piece of equipment, like from the javelin to the pole vault to even the hurdles and the components that they use, has to have engineering involved in it, right? So when I go out and I speak with schools, if I do a presentation or tell them kind of about what engineering is like to be a professional engineer, um, I ask them, well, what excites them? Is it sports? Is it football? Well, think about all the things in football that have an impact. Right now with traumatic brain injuries and with effects of concussions and multiple concussions, the science and engineering that's going into a football helmet is amazing. Same with the pads and the cleats and anything that make you run faster, make you hit harder, but safer.
I know you can see that in golf, right? Like
Oh yeah,
especially with golf, the balls are even different in
yeah,
golf now than they were 20 or 30 years
yeah.
ago.
The numbers of dimples on them, the composite and how the densities and the material differences in a golf ball versus the heads and the flexibility of the shafts. It's pretty neat, and those are things that kids who maybe like. I'm from Colgate, Oklahoma, which is a small town in southeastern, south central Oklahoma. Not a lot of engineering going on there as a profession, but it's a ranching and a farming community, and there's a lot of tractors, and there really is engineering there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not something that maybe your average high school or middle school student's going to see as engineering. They're going to see it as something that they've, whether it's a diesel mechanic or whether it's a welder, a fabricator. There's a whole lot of engineering that goes into that, and you can either choose to go in and do those professions, which is great, or if you want to go in and improve them and make them better, you can go in engineering, and that's something that I think we should be instilling in our kids and the next couple generations that, hey, engineering's just not sitting there doing reports and calculations. It's whether it's the search and rescue stuff, it's field application of engineering principles in a hostile environment, or whether it's developing a new sports component. There's a lot out there.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you had wished I'd asked you that maybe I should have brought up? Or
Oh, that sounds like one of those questions they ask you at the end of the interview.
I figured it was better as, is there anything you'd like to add? What should I have asked you that I didn't?
Yeah, he asked a lot of good questions. I think this program is great. I think getting to know maybe beyond the surface level of what some of the folks here in the Corps are doing, whether it's from an operator at a navlock, or whether it's someone in hydropower or environmental, one of the archaeologists. I think those are the neat things. The Corps is amazing. It is a large group of highly trained individuals, and oftentimes we get too focused on what we're doing. And sometimes it's neat to pull back and see kind of what I think some of the other folks are doing. So I hope someone out there enjoyed listening to me ramble on about this.
Nah, wasn't rambling at all. I didn't think so.
But I hope you keep doing these. I even like the ones that you've got put up on the monitors, where it's just a little, couple things, about this. I don't know if it's a spotlight or if
the spotlights. Yeah.
Just that little window into someone's life is neat, especially now that a lot of people are teleworking, not that many people in the building. We don't see, I've probably only seen you 3 times in the last year.
Not really. I don't, maybe twice since we were doing the building inspections for the COVID centers, because you headed up that team as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think I saw you where we all got together, and then I went out with Major Swain and his group, and I want to make sure I mention that, the town of Surfside, they have links on their website for people affected by the building collapse there. You can go to www.townofsurfsidefl, as in town of Surfside, Florida, .gov. Select the Champlain Tower South information link when it appears on the rotator. I believe it's the second or third item on the rotator. I want to thank you for joining us, Chris. It was really great sitting down and talking to you and learn. I had no idea you had spent all that time in the Guard and you were also a Joint Task Force Bravo alum. Like, there's a small group of us in that little group too. Colonel Childers, who was here, was a JTFB guy too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's up in Walla Walla.
Walla Walla District. Yeah, he's a commander now. Walla
Yeah.
Walla,
So
right?
one of his engineers was one of the ones that joined us in Surfside.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, really? So how many different districts would you say were represented while you were there? How many do you think? I mean, roughly.
Walla Walla, Baltimore, Salt Lake City, which is actually out of Sacramento, strangely enough, St. Louis, Tulsa, and SPD, South Pacific Division. Office. I think that's... Oh, and Denver. That's it.
Oh, wow. You know what? One thing I would like you to do, give me your 15-second elevator speech for why people should come work for the Corps. If you haven't already, if you've listened to this entire thing, and you haven't gotten like why you should come work for the Corps, especially if you're an engineer or you're a STEM person, someone with a STEM background, what would you say is the best reason?
The best reason for coming to the Corps, if you're an engineer or STEM person, really is the diversity of the work, our varied mission, the business lines are so different that you can work from civil works to milcon to hydropower, navigation, recreation, environmental. That there's something that we can each, I think, find that is a draw to us. That combined with the great people and the camaraderie. I mentioned needing support here. You're part of the power team, Carrie Stark. Even though she was off, and it was like the weekend, she was helping me out while I was gone, having to get timesheets and all the stuff that you have to do when you're on deployment. You don't see that in the private sector. I've been there. I've worked for a few firms, as I mentioned, and it's really the combination of the diversity of the work, the people, and the work-life balance that it really makes the Corps a great place to be.
Thank you for joining us for Corpstruction, Episode 5. Corpstruction is a production of the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Public Affairs Office. To learn more about the Tulsa District, you can visit our website at www.swt.usace.army.mil. You can receive the most up-to-date information about the Tulsa District and the Corps of Engineers by following us on social media, usually at USACE Tulsa, all one word. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.